Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Jay Fremont, author of the debut novel, Magician of Light. Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's great to be having this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, if someone listening hasn't yet heard about your novel, Magician of Light, yet, how would you describe the novel?
Okay, so Magician of Light is a Gothic romance about glassmaker René Lalique, the mysterious Englishwoman he falls in love with, and their haunting encounters. The story starts in Paris with young Lalique in his apprenticeship to renowned jeweler Louis Lecoq. But after a while, Lalique is feeling stifled in his conventional schooling and apprenticeship, so he leaves Paris to study at the Crystal Palace outside of London. There he is introduced to Lucinda Halliburton and her dysfunctional family. When they meet, Lucinda has returned from a disastrous trip to an archaeological dig in Egypt sponsored by her grandfather, the Baron. And with a history of mental illness that runs in the family, she now believes that she's being preyed upon by ancient Egyptian spirits. Renee is drawn into her eerie situation, and while he is enchanted with the beautiful but strange Miss Halliburton, he's unsure of what's going on. Is it imagination, insanity, or real ghostly encounters? So my plot turns on their twisting fates while shedding light on the dark side of Lalique's personal life. There's a lot of genuine historical detail.
That's great. And I'm curious, do you remember the original idea or impetus that led you to write Magician of Light?
Yeah, actually, so while I was creating short stories on my blog and writing and researching for a novel about ancient Egypt, I had a dream about meeting a man in a chair behind a counter. He was talking to me, but, and smiling, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. So, when I woke up, I was like, who is this? I don't know who this person is. But then he appeared to me again in a dream 3 months later and told me I am to promote him. And then again 6 weeks later, and I was like, who is this guy and why is he haunting me? And then fast forward another 18 months after the initial dream, I stumbled across Lalique's picture on the internet. Part of the ancient Egyptian story involves glass making, and so I wanted to kind of look into that more. And it was weird because that picture was exactly how I saw him in the first dream. And obviously I knew that he would be part of my novel. And ultimately he became the story as I delved into his personal life and came to know him.
And what kind of research did you do about René Lalique? And can you tell us, for those listeners who may not be familiar with his career as both an artist and jewelry maker and glassmaker?
Oh, sure. Research, any historical fiction writer serious about their craft knows that the writing entails a considerable amount of research. And it would be an understatement to say that René Lalique was a busy and productive artist. I mean, when I started to find out about him, I was like, wow, he had so many remarkable accomplishments and events that it was really difficult to choose, what to include in my novel. So I bought several books and gained insight into specific people that influenced his early life and work and rise to fame, such as Louis Lecoq, Sarah Bernhardt, Kalous Gulbenkian, who was a billionaire in the early 1900s, so you can imagine, very wealthy. And Francois Coty, I'm sure people have heard of him. He's you think of makeup, but he actually started as a perfumer in the early, actually late 1800s. So I did discover a book of Lalik's correspondences when he was a jeweler, before he was actually a glassmaker, that were mostly business, but there was a few personal letters to his mother and wife, Elise, but it was written in French, and there was no available translation in English. So unless you count Duolingo, I don't know much French. So I spent a lot of time typing into Google Translate, and besides those, there was other articles, blogs, and uh, uh, lengthy doctoral thesis and about him. So he really had, I mean, he was a jeweler. He was renowned as a jeweler and a glassmaker. So he had two careers, not just one. I mean, it was amazing.
Well, and I'm just curious about the craft. I mean, it's not really about writing, but I'm curious about the craft of glass making. I mean, like, I glanced at some of the articles about him online, and they were showing some of the glass ornaments. How did they do that? I mean, are they making a mold?
Yeah, exactly. He really, the thing that was incredible about him is that he started using glass in his jewelry. And I mean, as a jeweler, he used different gems. Like he wasn't doing what traditional, like diamonds and rubies and emerald. I mean, he
Mhm.
started to use his like he made miniature paintings. It was so incredible. He started out with enamel. So which is actually a form of glass, right? And enamel is, you make little. He did plique azure. I don't know if you've heard of that, but when he'd make dragonfly wings, it's putting the enamel into a little
Wow.
metal framework, and then actually it's one of the hardest ones because after they get the glass in there and they fire it, and I mean it's firing, firing, fire. It's like it's so time consuming, but they take acid and etch away the metal backing, so now you have this, it's like a network. So it's like stained glass, but he was doing this on brooches. So you're just like, how did you, so small.
Wow.
So yeah, the glass, he started with that with his jewelry. He started using pâte de verre, which is a paste, like a glass paste. And then
Mhm.
as he moved on to larger pieces, like the perfume bottles, he would do molds. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Cire Perdue, but they make a sculpture or a piece in wax, and then they build plaster around it.
Got it.
And what happens then they pour the glass into it. It melts the wax, and then you get the sculpture, because the plaster has been built
Right.
around it. and
Okay.
and then so that's what mostly with his vases and his other stuff. That's what he would do. He did these molds, but then he really worked the glass after it. I mean, he ended up having his glass factory. There was like 300 people. He did a little bit of glass blowing, but it was mostly the molds that he worked
Right.
with.
Hey, this is Jeff from the Reading and Writing Podcast. Do you know what I love when I'm reading a great new book? A cup of tea. It's such a fun ritual. Settling down with a cup of tea and a new novel that I'm excited to read. Why not treat yourself to a cup of Plum Deluxe teas? Every loose leaf tea is hand blended, fresh, using only the best ingredients. From bold black teas to relaxing herbal blends, incredible dessert teas, or fun floral flavors, there's a delicious tea waiting for you. And I'm not making this up. They have a flavor of tea called Reading Nook Blend Black Tea. It's a tea that pairs perfectly with reading, writing, and relaxing. Plum Deluxe is a family owned business, and they have one of the best selections of delicious, flavorful herbal teas as well as bold black tea flavors. Visit plumdeluxe.com /listen and use the promo code RWP to save 12% on your first order. Tea also makes a great gift. That's plumdeluxe.com/listen and use the promo code RWP. There's nothing better than enjoying a great cup of tea with a good book. And now you can get your great tea from plumdeluxe.com.
Summer's almost here. Yay, right? So, when's the last time you tried on your swimsuits and summer clothes? If you could get back into summer shape in one visit, would you do it? Here's Dr. Brian Strand for Sonobello to explain.
It really is quite remarkable. Sonobello doctors use a technology called microlaser fat removal, and the results are amazing. We customize your procedure to accomplish your goals. Just share with us the problem areas where you'd like the fat in inches removed. And in one visit, they're gone permanently. I can't tell you how often I hear clients say how many years they've been trying to diet and exercise those inches away. And we did it in one comfortable visit.
It's time to get your summer on. Visit any of our Sonobello locations across the U.S. and right now you can save $250. Visit sonobello.com/save. sonobello.com/save. That's sonobello.com/save.
Got it. So what was your own writing journey that led you to writing and getting your debut novel published?
Well, my writing journey didn't start until later in life, but I spent a lot of my childhood with my nose in a book. At 10 years old, I knew I was going to be a vet, and so of course I read James Harriet, All Creatures Great and Small, and All Things Wise and Wonderful, right? But by the time I got to high school, I was kind of a nerdy bookworm, so I'd read a lot of classics, Dickens, Dostoevsky. But then, of course, once I got into vet school, I wasn't reading anything but textbooks.
Right.
But then I graduated, moved to California, found the love of my life, got married, had a couple of kids, life. So between raising my kids, practicing vet medicine, and then I also taught as an adjunct professor at a local community college and university, there just wasn't a lot of extra me time, reading or writing. So I really started writing stories when my kids were older and not hanging out with me anymore. But I have to say, I've always been a storyteller at heart, like telling stories to clients and students, like, this is what happened when, the owner didn't do this. They took the e-collar off and then, or success stories like we did this surgery and then Fluffy went on to live another 6 years, I recall there was one time in my surgical nursing class, and I was explaining how important anesthetic monitoring was, and telling my stories. My students' stories about certain cases, and I used the phrase, "Remember, you're taking your patient to the precipice of death." And years later, a tech, one of my former students, she joined the practice and she said that line really impressed her. So I guess that was the beginning of my literary career.
And then are you still practicing veterinary medicine, or have you
No,
retired?
I've been retired for this few years now.
Mhm.
I did it for 25 years and then that was long enough. But I enjoyed it. I love surgery. I really love surgery.
That's great. Well, what was your writing process when you were working on Magician of Light? Since you were doing all of this research, did you do an extensive outline before you started writing?
Yeah, actually, I do make a lot of outlines and I thought about a lot about the plot and jot ideas down before the I start the actual writing. But the funny thing is that whenever I start a story or it kind of takes on a life of its own and it starts to lead me instead of me leading it. It's like I'm following a path and I always I don't know where I'm going sometimes. And it's funny because the story doesn't always end up the way I thought it would initially. I mean, like I said, I was writing this novel about ancient Egypt, and then all of a sudden Lalik's inserted in, and so it's like life. It's an adventure.
Sure. Well, are you working on another novel now?
Yeah, actually, I have that. I broke the what ended up happening was I after I finished it, the first book, the Magician of Life, was actually over 200,000 words. So, and it was ancient Egypt. It was like 4 storylines interwoven, and so it was too complicated. And the publishers don't want you. It's too long of a book. So, I actually ended up with 2 books, and so I have this ancient Egyptian novel, and I just have to work with my editor. But I'm actually starting my next novel is going to be set in California in the Old West, but I don't really have too many details because it's in the nascent stage right
Sure,
now.
sure. Well, what writing advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories and novels?
Well, I think the most important thing is, first of all, is write about what you know. I mean, do your research and really think about your plot. It was interesting because just recently I'd read a piece by a writer involved in the series, Breaking Bad. I'm sure you know Breaking
Mhm.
Bad, and their collective writing process. And what Vince Gilligan did was he encouraged the individual writers to suggest an idea, and then what they would do then is take that idea to its logical conclusion. So as a group, they discussed, if that storyline detail would ultimately conform to the trajectory of the overall plot. And I guess I kind of do the same thing with, my plot to a certain degree is, does your idea make sense? Is it believable? Does it fit into the arc of the story? And especially for historical fiction people, you really have to have your details right. You can't write that in the 1870s and they had computers. I mean, that's obviously a exaggeration, but you have to figure out what did those people, how did those people live? Would that character say and do that type of thing? Based on the social norms, what their society, what their societal status was, that kind of thing. So,
That's great. Well, what novels or nonfiction books have you read recently that you enjoyed?
well, actually, right now I'm reading The Woman in the Green Dress by T. Cooper, but I'd say in the last couple of months, I actually picked up Isabella Lindy's A House of Spirits and Daughter of Fortune, because the Daughter of Fortune was a book about kind of the Old West, and I wanted to get her, see how she dealt with it. It was funny because as I'm reading and I'm like, oh yeah, I read about that, because it's the same historical stuff. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
But and then I read The Auditorium, which is a collection of short stories by Melissa Pritchard, and it was quite odd. I was like, oh, this might be a little too odd, but it was good. But I have to say, I spend a lot of my time reading nonfiction. Like if I'm going to write about a stagecoach, I'm a weirdo. I'm like, I gotta know everything about stagecoaches.
Right. Well, where can people find you online if they'd like to learn more about you and your novel, Magician of Light?
They can find me at drjfremont.com. And I also am on Instagram, and my handle is Inside the Egg. But if they go to my website, they'll see that. The other thing that I did was, for people who want to learn more about Lalique, we made a little short video. It's like only a couple minutes long, but if they really want to find out about Renee, they can go onto YouTube, and there's a lot of videos, and you can just see his amazing artwork. It's and learn about him.
That's great. Well, again, we've been speaking with Jay Fremont, author of the debut novel, Magician of Light. The novel is available now, so go buy a copy. And Jay, thanks for doing this interview.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate your interest, Jeff.
Absolutely.
The difference between an agent and a realtor is real. Realtors have the expertise to find exactly what you need and the ethics to do the right thing, even when it's the harder thing. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors. That's who we are.
Sure, we have 30 seconds to tell you that drivers who switch to Progressive could save big. But then what? We could romance the legal copy. It never gets the attention it deserves. And some lawyer worked real hard on it. So take it away, lawyer.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive in 2020. Potential savings will vary.
Now that was some beautiful legal. Well done, lawyer. Well done.